This is what ruined the March digital SAT for so many students, and how to avoid a dumpster fire level score on your next SAT. My name is Brooke. I've been coaching the SAT and ACT for almost 2 decades. I've coached students to perfect scores on both exams. I've created an entire online platform that is a self-paced course for both the SAT and the ACT. For the SAT, we have online practice tests, online practice sets. You should go check it out at SupertutorTV.com. We also have private tutoring. I do group classes for the digital SAT, so definitely check all that stuff out. So the most common comment that I came across on Reddit was that the more difficult math section 2 was hard. It was a massacre, according to one Reddit user. And I'm going to try to deconstruct why that happened, and how you can protect yourself next time from that kind of a math section completely rolling your score. So the first thing that happened is most of the students realized that you couldn't just Desmos the whole math section like you could on the practice tests. Sometime between the time when the College Board rolled out all 4 of the first few practice tests that are on the Blue Book app and now, the test makers figured out that around 30 to 40% of those questions originally you could just throw into Desmos and it would solve them out for you, and you didn't even have to know the underlying principles of math for a lot of the questions. That made the test really fast and easy for a lot of students. And so the College Board has stepped up and changed the test a bit to make it so that you can't just Desmos everything. That doesn't mean Desmos isn't still a good tool to understand and to know how and when to use, but it means that you shouldn't just throw everything automatically into Desmos like you do on the practice exams. The remedy for this is to always know more than the Desmos way in terms of how to do a problem. Never walk away from a practice test problem saying, oh, I'll just Desmos it. Whenever you have a problem you can Desmos, make sure you know how to do it without Desmos as well, because chances are if the College Board repeats a question like that, they may do it instead of using a bunch of numbers, they may use crazy variables, right? They might try to get you to engage in logical reasoning. They might make the question more complex and more time consuming in a way that using Desmos isn't the smartest way. The other thing that I'm going to say is you have to evaluate questions before you dive in and choose which method to use to know when to use Desmos and when not to use Desmos. As a gift to all of you out there, my next YouTube video will be when not to Desmos. So subscribe to our channel now so that you get that in your feed. I will tell you guys when not to Desmos. Number 2, the second problem that a lot of students had with the digital SAT this March is that some math problems were not represented in the practice tests, and then they came across them in the actual test, and it took them a lot of time to get up on their feet with these problems. In particular, the kind of problems that students struggled with tended to be geometry or problem solving and data analysis problems. Now, when it comes to the SAT, the majority of questions on the SAT fall under the umbrella of algebra. And what that means is if you're prepping for the SAT with minimal time, yes, the best thing you can prep for is algebra problems. But therein lies a problem. There's a great breadth of problems that exists within the genre of problems that is problem solving and data analysis, and within the genre of geometry that still could be tested on the SAT, but may never have occurred on any practice test so far, because those areas are not tested very frequently. So when they're not tested very frequently, guess what? The questions that you've seen are not necessarily as representative of what you're responsible for knowing. And so with that in mind, if you are prepping for the SAT and you're getting a 770 or you're getting an 800 on your practice tests, beware, there are 2 areas of the test where you probably should do a deep dive and do all the hard questions you can. SupertutorTV has an online SAT platform where we have lots of practice questions, of math questions that are in that geometry vertical, in that problem solving vertical, so you can cut your teeth on those questions beyond what's just available from Khan Academy or the College Board. So you can drill those lesser tested elements down and make sure that you're on top of them as much as you're on top of that algebra, which occurs more frequently. The third thing that students noted is that a lot of the math questions seem to be more time consuming. Now, first of all, I'm going to blame this in part on the methods that students are using. You guys have to understand how to use shortcuts on the SAT. And I think a lot of people were just relying on Desmos as their shortcut. And then when that didn't cut it, they didn't have anything else to fall back on. So my advice to you guys is bulk up on all the shortcuts you can. The good news for you is that this version, the digital SAT, is very similar in terms of content to the last version of the SAT. And so all of the hacks and tricks that I have up on our YouTube that teach you about how to hack the SAT math section that are on our YouTube channel are still potentially relevant for the digital SAT. So I recommend that you go through all of my old math hack videos and learn all of the little tips and tricks and shortcuts and all of that kind of stuff, because all those little shortcuts are going to add up and help you get on top of the time as the difficult section becomes more difficult, okay? And the second thing that I like to do is I like to do a little exercise sometimes with my students where we do a practice set or a practice test, but instead of just going through it normally and doing each question once, what I challenge my students to do is you can put extra time when you take it on the Blue Book app if you want. You can pretend you have double time. And then I want students to do every question in 2 different ways so that you practice your flexibility as a problem solver. That's another skill that you need to have if you really want to excel on the SAT, because you never know what a particular problem is going to require. So the more methods of problem solving you have to work with, the better off you're going to be. The fourth thing that ruined the March digital SAT for some students, stepping aside from the math section for a second, was that on the reading section, some of the vocabulary was particularly difficult, in some cases more challenging than what they saw in the Blue Book app. So though vocabulary is one of the last frontiers, so to speak, that I recommend students look at, I would say that you should be getting a word list and you should be learning words from that word list. We have a word list at SupertutorTV, and I will give it away for free to you guys. You can download it on our free resources page, supertutortv.com/free-resources. So you can download a copy of our word list and get a little bit more prepared for vocabulary. The last thing that I'm going to say is there were also some technical issues that ruined the March digital SAT for some students. In particular, some students that were on a Mac had problems with parentheses not printing on their math section. Talk about making your math section stupidly difficult. That would do it. If that's you, you can reach out to the College Board and try to see if you can do a makeup exam, because yeah, that's really uncool, right? There were probably some other technical glitches and issues. There were some test centers that had their tests canceled at the last minute. And I know if that was you, that's really a bummer, especially in places with test availability issues. So the rollout wasn't perfect, but hopefully many of you are going to be getting your scores back sooner. Maybe you just did. If so, tell us how you did in the comments. Tell us what your impressions of the March SAT were, and if you have any tips for everybody else out there. I hope you guys liked the tips that I shared. If you want more awesome tips, again, be sure to check out all the resources we have at SupertutorTV.com, as well as right here on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe so you see our next video on what not to Desmos, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Good luck on your next SAT.